Hi, welcome to Gospel with Greg, and in the video today I'm going to be answering various questions I have been asked about preaching and being an ordained minister. So here in a few days, on January 28th, a few days from when I'm uploading this, we'll make 2 years that I have been an ordained minister, and so I thought that this would be a good time for me to upload this video. And so this is mostly going to be a variety of questions that I've been asked by different people who found out that I was a preacher and minister, and so I thought that it could potentially be valuable, particularly to someone who's new to preaching or being ordained, or they've been praying about if that's something God wants them to do. So these are kind of some common questions that I've been asked. And even the ones that are about me, more about me personally, I'll kind of talk more about the broad context of it. And so, jumping into the first question, what ministry things am I involved with outside of my channel? So at this point, I mostly go around and preach at different churches that I'm asked to preach at as an evangelist. But I also was involved with a rehab ministry when I lived in Tennessee. It was something that another minister and I would go down to a local rehab each week, and we would basically have a church service, play some songs through a speaker, and then give a sermon, and we would have prayer with the people there at the end. And so we would kind of alternate, take turns preaching, and then after a while the other minister kind of had some other obligations that he had to attend to, but I was able to keep going. So for a little while I went by myself. And also while I lived in Tennessee, and during the same time, for a little while, I led a young adults group, kind of like teens and college age people, with one of my buddies. We did that for a while. But like I said, now I mostly do these videos and go around and preach. So the next question is kind of a two-parter. The first part is, am I a pastor? I am not a pastor in the sense of leading a congregation, because some people define that differently, but I'm not like the pastor of a church, but I am ordained. The second part of the question is, do I think I will ever be a pastor? To that, I would say I don't feel a pressing call at the moment to become a pastor, but it's one of those things where God has used me for plenty of things I never thought I would do, just because I either couldn't imagine it or I just didn't think I would be able to do it. That, I don't ever want to say I would never do it, and so kind of my answer to that is not entirely sure, but I'm just going to follow God and have Him tell me what to do and do that if and when He tells me to do it. So question number 3, how long have I been preaching and how long have I been ordained? So I've been doing Gospel with Greg since January of 2021. So that makes 5 years at the time of uploading this. I've been preaching in church kind of formally since May of 2023. So that's about 2.5 years from the time this is uploaded. And I got ordained, like I said at the beginning, a couple years ago in January of 2024. Question number 4. What is the difference between being a preacher, minister, and pastor? So like I said, sometimes people have different definitions for these words, and different denominations and churches and groups may have different requirements, but this is kind of a broad general answer. So a preacher is kind of just someone who preaches, has been called to preach. A minister, assuming, we're talking about ordained minister, because again, minister can have a variety of different meanings. You might hear people talk about they minister through song, or they minister through this or that. But again, if we're talking about like ordained minister, that is someone who kind of has like an official license. So it allows them to do things like perform marriages, among other things, but that's an example. And for a pastor, again, some people use that term kind of loosely or have different definitions, but pastor is someone who leads a congregation. And so senior pastor of a church is what a lot of people think of when they think of that. But there are positions in some churches like associate pastor, or there might be like a youth or children's pastor in certain churches, particularly larger ones. But in any case, you can kind of see those as like official leadership roles within a specific church. And so that's kind of a basic general rundown of some of the differences, and you can kind of see some overlap there, because like a pastor is going to be ordained and is obviously going to preach as well, but not every preacher is ordained or a pastor. Next question is, what was the process of me getting ordained? Basically, how did I get ordained? And how does someone get ordained more generally? So for me in particular, I did it through the church I attended at the time. This was when I lived in Tennessee. So I basically, I had started preaching, and I'd been praying about this, and when I felt really sure that God wanted me to be ordained, I went to the senior and associate pastor of the church and kind of told them that, and we sat and had a conversation, and they answered questions I had about that, and they kind of filled me in on some information that they felt I should know. And I ended up having to wait about 2.5 months, and that's pretty customary. And the way they explained it was they kind of want to make sure it's something that after some time you still feel the call to do, and so they encouraged me to keep praying over that time. And I chose to do some self-study as well during that time about what the Bible says about leadership and getting ordained and that kind of thing. So, and ultimately we had a ceremony at the church when the time came. It started with me testifying at the beginning. They read some scripture, and they ended up laying hands on me, praying, and presented me with the official license at the end. So that was kind of how it was done for me. But there are different paths that people take. Some people get ordained online. Other people go to seminary. And then there are also some official, like, organizations you can kind of get ordained by. And some churches and denominations have more concrete and uniform procedures for doing this, and might even have certain educational requirements and training for you to go through, while others don't have that. So kind of what church or denomination you're in may influence that. You can also be ordained through a specific denomination in some cases. So I know people that are ordained specifically as elders in the Methodist Church, but you can just kind of be ordained in general as well, and that's the case with me. I'm personally Pentecostal, but my ordination isn't through like a Church of God or Pentecostal organization or anything like that. Like I said, it was just through the church I attended at the time. They were the ones that handled it, and it was a non-denominational church. And there are also some churches that will license someone to preach, and an official ordination comes later. if and when they become a pastor, but that's not uniform among. It's not universal among all churches and denominations that they do it that way. And there are some cases where it may be preferred that you be, maybe there's a church or denomination that would prefer that you be ordained through them if you're going to have some kind of leadership role in that specific church or denomination. And there are also certain positions that may at least prefer that you be ordained through some type of specific organization. And so, for instance, I looked into being a chaplain for a hospital at one point, and they wanted people to be ordained through certain well-known organizations and gave examples of that. And I ended up not going through the full application process and didn't get the position, but that was one thing I noticed as I was looking through different chaplain positions. And so places in situations like that may have certain preferences. You may also be charged at your ordination where other ministers will ask you your view on different doctrines, but you may not have to do this. I didn't have to because I knew the senior pastor and associate pastor that were doing the ordination pretty well, so they kind of knew where I stood on things. And I'd been doing gospel with Greg for a few years already, so a lot of my views on things were kind of public for anybody to look up anyway. But there are some cases where that may be part of your ordination, maybe if they don't know you as well. And so and the point of the charging, even though I didn't go through it myself, but kind of my understanding of it is, if you're charged at your ordination where they ask you different, what do you believe about this or that, it's not necessarily, and it might be uncomfortable, but the point of it isn't, for them to be like a drill sergeant and, hammer you with questions to kind of make you squirm or to try to, embarrass you in front of the congregation. It's not that. At least ideally it shouldn't be. But from what I've gathered, like part of the logic behind it is they kind of want to know where you stand because, when that church or that group ordains you, it's kind of like they are standing in agreement saying that, this person should be ordained. And, they basically don't want to enable you if it turns out that, you actually hold views that are heresy. And so that's some kind of context on the ordination process and different variations. And so, there's different routes you can go with that and kind of your individual circumstance, kind of what church or denomination you're affiliated with and what you want to do can kind of affect what path you take with that. The next question, what is the farthest I have ever traveled to preach? So the farthest I've ever traveled was 5 hours. And so I mentioned that I lived in Tennessee for a while. I grew up in Ohio, and I lived down there for a few years, which is why you might hear a bit of a southern accent when I talk. And I actually live back in Ohio now, and people love to comment on how I talk. But anyway, so since I've moved back, I have made a couple trips back down to where I lived in Tennessee to preach a couple times, and that was about a 5-hour trip. So that's the farthest I've traveled thus far, but I wouldn't be surprised if I ended up surpassing that one day and had to go somewhere even farther. But that's the furthest I've gone at this point. Next question, have I ever preached a funeral or a wedding? I have been asked to preach a funeral for a family friend, They said that when they pass away, they want me to do the funeral, but thankfully that hasn't happened yet. He's still with us. So as of now, I haven't officially done one. But I have done a wedding for a family member that got married, and it was kind of a simpler ceremony. And they said that they were kind of relaxed in terms of what I said and kind of how it went. They gave me some specifics. Like they said they wrote their own vows and they wanted to do that. And so, but they told me they weren't too picky about what I said otherwise. And I feel like for my first wedding, it went pretty well. And there were some things I kind of took from it going forward if I did more. One thing I learned is that it's important to talk to the couple a good bit in advance, regardless of how elaborate or how picky they are, to make sure you have time to readjust the plans if needed. Like I said, the couple that I did the wedding for were very easy to work with. But even if you are a minister and you're going to be doing a wedding, even if the couple tells you basically, I'll just say or do whatever you want, it's good to get an outline together, at least a basic one, of what you plan on saying once you're up there, and kind of get the details from them about, what if there's anything specific you should know outside of kind of once the whole wedding party's up there. And so it's good to get those specifics and make sure everybody's on the same page. So some specific details you want to get are if the couple is writing their own vows, or if they want to have the kind where like they repeat after you. And then also, is it going to be one of those situations where the father of the bride is going to give her away, or are they going to not do that? And so it's good to kind of get things like that. And again, have a basic outline and share it with the couple in advance, even if they are laid back about it. Just because, if nothing else, it just makes sure that everybody knows what to expect when you're up there during the ceremony. And again, if you happen to have a case where maybe there isn't a practice, a lot of couples have a practice for the wedding. And some couples may not do that, and so I think that that's particularly good if there's not going to be an official practice for the ceremony, just to make sure everybody is on the same page of what's going to be said and done and in what order. Just makes things run smoother. So the next question is, what does someone have to do to be able to preach in a church? So again, some churches and denominations may have certain specific requirements, or at least things that they would prefer. But in general, all you really need is to find a pastor who will let you preach in their church. And again, some churches may at least prefer you to be ordained. And there are some situations where you may need to be ordained. So like for instance, if you want to do a jail ministry, you do need to be ordained for that. But if we're just talking about preaching in churches, if the specific church or denomination doesn't have any specific requirements, really, again, you just need a pastor who's going to let you preach. But again, it's one of those things that whatever you do for a calling, it needs to be led by God. Next question, do I make money preaching? So sometimes churches I preach at will want to take up an offering for me or give me some money. And if they really feel led and want to give me something, I'll take it, but I don't expect it. I certainly don't expect it. And I don't make money from ministry things any other way besides that. Last question. Can you use your license outside of the state you got it in? For example, can you perform a wedding in a different state than you were ordained in? So, I'm not an expert on all the nuances of all the different types of ordination. I can only speak for myself and the kind of ordination I have. But for me, with the ordination I have, I can marry people outside of the state I got ordained in, and I have. There may be other types of ordination where maybe there are certain restrictions, and I would encourage you to ask that up front. So if you're somebody that's going to be getting ordained, I think that would be a good question to ask of, are there any restrictions about, where I can marry people and things like that. And that was something I asked ahead of time just to make sure it wasn't going to be an issue. Another question, this is probably the one I'll finish up on, is do I get nervous preaching? At this point, not really. In general, especially if it's a church that I've preached at before. So the church I got ordained at, I preached there multiple times, and if I go back and visit Tennessee and get to preach there, I don't really get nervous. I've preached at the church I went to when I was a small child several times. I really don't get nervous there when I get to preach there. Maybe I get a touch nervous if I'm preaching at a church for the first time. So if a church I've never preached at asks me to preach, maybe I'll do a little bit, but even then, not really. I'm not really somebody that gets nervous about public speaking or anything like that. And so if I ever get nervous, it's not really nervous about preaching per se. It would be a more circumstantial thing, but generally not too much, no. Alright, so hope you found this video helpful. Again, if you're new to preaching or being a minister, or you feel like that's a calling God may be putting on your life, I hope this was helpful for you especially. And if anybody has any other questions, please feel free to ask. Again, especially if you're kind of on that path of starting to preach or become a minister, please feel free to ask me any questions you may have that I didn't cover in this video. I'll do my best to answer, and I can, if I don't know the perfect answer off the top of my head, I know plenty of other preachers and ministers that I'm friends with. I can consult them and get an answer for you from them. So please feel free to do that if you would like. And until next time, God bless.